Hello, my name's Mike Ott, and I want to do a series called Learning Leadership from the Toy Box. And I want to take a few different toys and just try to figure out what type of characteristics that we can just learn from the toy box. Toys, I love toys. I'm a children's pastor, youth pastor in the past. I love toys. I have a little 4-year-old son that I love playing with him. I just love toys. And so I'm going to do this series based on toys. And the first thing I want to start out with, though, is as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus, always going to connect it back to the Bible. And so if you want to read this passage later, it's 1 Samuel chapter 14. It's one of my favorite chapters. It's one of my favorite adventures in the Bible. Let me share a little bit of the story of what's going on. So there's a man by the name of Jonathan. He is the prince of Israel. His father Saul is the first king Israel ever had. And Jonathan someday, hopefully, would be the next king in line. And he is his son. They're on a military campaign. His father Saul is under a pomegranate tree, and they're about to go fight these Philistines. And Jonathan and his armor bearer, and an armor bearer is a person that would help carry Jonathan's armor. He'd protect Jonathan. He was very loyal to him, was with Jonathan. And Jonathan said, hey, let's go over to these Philistines. And as he's going over, he says, we'll call up to them. And if they say, no, stay down there till we come down there. Or if they say, no, you guys come up there, we'll take that as a sign. If they say come up, that is a sign from God that God has given them over into his hands. And so this is what the armor bearer says to Jonathan in his response. He says, do what is in your heart. You choose. I'm right here with you, whatever you decide. So this armor bearer, he trusted in the ethical decisions of Jonathan. He trusted in his leadership. He trusted that Jonathan wasn't going to lead him astray. And he followed Jonathan. And so Jonathan and his armor bearer, they go up to the cliffs, and they call up. And the Philistines say, hey, come up here and we'll teach you guys a lesson. We'll come up, you come up here, we'll lick you. And so Jonathan and the armor bearer, they start climbing this cliff. And I don't know if you've ever rock climbed or done anything similar to that. That takes a lot of energy out of you. And then you're carrying all your armor and your weaponry. And they climb this cliff, and they get to the top. And they draw their swords, and they attack these men on this little piece of land, and God gives them the victory. And they win, and then they beat the Philistines. I want to talk today about ethics. Leaders making right decisions, making important decisions. And the toy I chose was very interesting. If you grew up and you're older than me and you grew up in the 80s, you're probably going to know how famous this toy was when it came out. You think in 80s, let me bring you back. What was popular during the 80s? Parachute pants, Members' Choice jackets, Reagan and Madonna, Trivia Pursuit, Cabbage Patch Kids. For me, it was Ninja Turtles. They were created in 1984. I was born in 1984. But there's something that came out that just memorized everybody. It was colorful. It was timeless. It was hard, but yet it was fun. And it's known as the Rubik's Cube. Now, the Rubik's Cube still is around today. And you can get it. And the Rubik's Cube is fun. And for me as a kid, I always tried to figure it out, and I could never figure it out. Even if you weren't born in the 80s and you're younger than me, if you go to YouTube, there's all sorts of competitions where people do it for speed to see how fast they can solve it. They blindfold themselves and do it. Some people can do one in both hands. There's different sizes. There's a lot of competitions. Chances are, even if you are younger than me, you've seen a Rubik's Cube. The Rubik's Cube was created in 1974 by a Hungarian teacher. Let me get his name right. It's Erno Rubik. So the Rubik's Cube was created after the creator, Hungarian teacher Erno, and he created this Rubik's Cube. That is a lot of fun. So we're going to see what we can learn from ethics and this toy right here. I'm going to be completely honest. There's some good things you can do with this cube, like you can get your solution. And the goal of it, what is it? To get all of these 9 the same color on every side. So you want blue here, orange here, white here, red, green, yellow. You want all solid colors all around. That's the end goal. I'm going to be completely honest. I have tore these apart because I thought, hey, maybe I can redesign it to get it back to where it needs to be. I also believe when I was a kid, I pulled the stickers off. Be honest, this is a lesson on ethics and leadership. Did you ever take the stickers off and try to get all the colors on one side? Comment below in the section and let me know. The goal of it is to get all the colors on the side. So we're going to learn ethics from the Rubik's Cube. The first thing is the solution. What do we want to do? We want to get all colors on the same. And to get that, first thing we need to make sure that we can be able to do is accept that there is a standard that is right. Okay? So to get us to where we need to be, we need to know there is a solution that can only be correct. Let me read a few things. I just got my notes over here because I don't want to make sure I miss anything in this section. Just as the Rubik's Cube is not solved until all 6 sides are completed and they have a color on it, there is an acceptable standard of what is right in the world. There are rules and expectations that form the standards of right. Now, I've gotten into a lot of conversations. What is absolute truth? What is right and what is wrong? And for each individual, I don't want to get off on that because we're talking a little bit different. But for each individual, for the most part, you can find what is right and wrong in every individual's life. Okay? If I kick a dog, there are going to be people that are going to say, that is wrong. Others will say, well, I don't really care. If I come into your house and I murder one of your family members, most people say that is wrong. There are standards of right and wrong. You just got to dig into an individual who refuses to accept absolute truth. They refuse to say, hey, this is right, this is wrong. And so you can find absolute truth in everybody. You just got to dig. That's my little rabbit trail of that. That's why I have my notes to help me keep on track. Rules and expectations don't end in Little League. Do you remember playing Little League or another sport or something else where it just had rules? You had to go to practice, you had to do this routine, you had to do this drill. Just because you're an adult, just because you become older, doesn't mean that there are not rules and expectations that you have to follow as a leader. Even if you are the head leader of your group or organization, you still have a standard of rules that you need to follow. When you do things correctly, it creates order. When you do things incorrectly, it creates chaos. The leader is the solution to a mixed up cube. Right now, my cube is all mixed up. Who's responsible? Are the colors responsible? Absolutely not. The person who is moving is responsible. So every move that I do as a leader, I am responsible for the outcome of this cube. To bring it into order, no matter how mixed up the cube becomes, the ultimate goal is to realign all the colors, match all the 6 sides, and as a leader, I must be the ethical catalyst to get it back to where it needs to be. And so we're going to learn a little bit more about that and how a leader, the core leader, needs to make sure that they're ethically sound. Ethics prevent one person from corrupting the whole environment with their lack of integrity. And then the last statement that I have under acceptable standard rights is the rules. Now, this is important for the leader. The rules you live by, the rules that you live by, and those you ignore will establish your character. Let me say it one more time. The rules you live by and those you ignore will establish your character. You may find yourself at a loss of words, but you should never find yourself at a loss for values. Your character and integrity are the biggest thing that you have as a leader. You need to guard them. So how do we make sure that we are continuing in this conversation of ethics? So first is we need to understand there is an acceptable standard of right. Second, we have to realize there's no shortcut in ethics. In fact, a Rubik's Cube boasted that there's only one solution, but get this, there is 43 quintillion possible moves that you can do. Yeah, I said 43 quintillion. My numbers on the paper: 4325203274489856000 moves that you can do on the Rubik's Cube. But there's only one solution. There are no shortcuts in the Rubik's Cube. You have to be able to do it in a certain pattern to be able to get to the solution. Lastly, every move you make impacts the whole cube. So if I was on the pattern to get all of my white ones, I like to start with white. If I was in the pattern to get all my white ones to this front top, and I mess up one of the moves there, I am going to throw off the rest of the cube. So we need to understand that to get to the solution of the cube, we need to be able to understand there's a standard of right, that we have no shortcuts, and every move that we do make impacts it. So what can we do as leaders? Well, when we have a messed up cube like this, we need to reflect on our leadership. Leaders, we can compromise ethical standards. Okay, we might have made a wrong decision. We might have made a wrong move. And we need to be able to be careful about those. Leaders aren't acceptable to compromising ethical standards. If we do that, we mess up the cube. Okay? So we need to be careful to guard against that. We don't want to compromise our ethical standards. The second thing is after we compromise and we make a bad decision, even if it was with good intentions, we make a bad decision and it was the wrong decision and we understand it was the wrong decision, we have to be careful that we don't rationalize an unethical decision. Okay? Well, I made that decision because of this pressure coming from this company, from this person, pressure me to do this, so I had to just go ahead and compromise. We have to be careful not to rationalize the unethical decisions that we make. And lastly, we need to make sure that we don't compartmentalize our unethical behavior, okay? That we don't just put it off, well, I made that decision at that time because of those pressures, that was just one thing. We need to be careful of those three things when we are evaluating our cube, when we're evaluating our situation, our group, our business, those that we're leading, and we're evaluating our leadership. And lastly, our third point and our final point of this conversation about the Rubik's Cube is we need to get back on track. The goal of this is to get to the solution, all colors on all sides. And as a leader, if we are messed up, even if we made a wrong decision, we made a wrong move, we had information given to us and we decided to make a move and the information was sound, and then we found out the information wasn't as sound as what we thought it was, and we made that move. These are ways that we can get back on track to get towards the solution of the Rubik's Cube, or the solution of where we need to get to as leaders. First, leaders need to accept responsibility. If we've made mistakes, we need to own up to those mistakes. We need to go and ask for forgiveness of those that we might have offended, those that we might have stepped on their toes, those that got in harm's way from something that we did. We need to be able to accept the responsibility of the mistakes. We are the leader, and we need to accept those. The second thing that we need to do to get back on track as leaders, we need to desire accountability. Okay? If I'm going to solve this, I'm going to be completely honest, I don't have everything memorized. I just don't. If I am going to solve this, to be honest, I need a paper that tells me every move that I need to make to get it to where I need to be, because I know there's one solution, I know there's a pattern, I can get it there. Just the same thing as leaders. We need accountability. We need people around us to help us make healthy decisions and healthy choices in our leadership leading. And lastly, we need to develop integrity. Probably the biggest thing that I've learned in leadership. I've done a lot of books, I've studied a lot of books. In fact, one of the books is called Learning Leadership from the Toy Box, which is where I kind of pulled some of my material today from. I'll post that down there so you can check that book. It's a good book. It shares a lot about different toys, histories of toys. I've learned a lot about leadership, and one of the biggest things that I learned is to protect and to develop your character and integrity, and to guard them. You know, you protect it from people messing up your integrity, but you also, at the end of the day, you are the number one responsible person in charge of developing your integrity. And so the Rubik's Cube can teach us a lot about ethics and can teach us a lot about leadership. As a leader, I'm going to challenge you. Go back and read that 1 Samuel chapter 14. See how Jonathan and his armor bearer made ethical decisions, and how they listened to God in this story, and how the armor bearer trusted the leadership because of Jonathan's decision making, his ethics, and his armor bearer was willing to go. Reflect on the Rubik Cube. Reflect on your group, your business, your area that you're over leadership, and look to see where you're trying to go. Look at if it's mixed up. Reflect on your life to see if you've compromised ethical decisions. Maybe you're rationalizing them, maybe you're compartmentalizing them and saying, oh, it's just because this happened. And then you need to make sure that you accept responsibility, that you desire accountability, and you develop integrity. So that is my lesson from a Rubik's Cube and learning leadership from a toy box. Thank you for listening.